So recently I decided to watch most of Helluva Boss. I didn't watch every single episode, and I'm probably not going to watch every episode, but I watched most of the show, and that's all that matters. And I'll be damned, maybe Vivzy Pop isn't as talentless as I initially made her out to be. I would like to start this off by saying that Helluva Boss is far from a good show. By no means am I saying that this is a good show, but to my surprise, this is nowhere near as bad as Has-Been Hotel was. Well, this aged like milk, didn't it, folks? Didn't it? Allow me to provide you with a bit of backstory as to how this video came to be. At the beginning of last year, a little cartoon would come out called Has-Been Hotel, and everyone would be making a big deal about it. A lot of people loved it, but there were also a lot of people that hated it, and the people that hated it really hated it, and that made me curious as to how bad this show could have been. So one day, I start watching every episode of the show at the time, and what are the odds I end up hating the show? I think the show is garbage. I think it's one of the worst cartoons I've ever seen, that sort of thing. When it came to something like this, I went into it hoping I would either like the show or not like it, but understand why people like it. And instead, I finished watching the show, not understanding at all what people saw in this, not understanding how anyone could find the show good or funny. I made a video reviewing season 1, and throughout that video, I acknowledged another cartoon from the same creator as Has-Been Hotel, Vivian Medrano. This other cartoon called Helluva Boss. My original plan was to review both Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss in the same video. However, because I hated Has-Been Hotel that much, I decided, no, we're gonna save Helluva Boss for a later time. We're gonna have that be its own other video. Fast forward to the summer of 2024, and I finally build up the courage to start watching Helluva Boss. And at the time, I didn't hate the show as much as Has-Been Hotel. I acknowledged, as you saw in that beginning clip, I acknowledged the show wasn't very good. I didn't like the show, I didn't love it, but it was also not as bad as Has-Been Hotel. A lot of the problems that I had with Has-Been Hotel, they were still there in Helluva Boss, however, they weren't there to the same extent. And as a result of that, I found Helluva Boss to be a considerably better show than Has-Been Hotel. However, here is a very important key detail to keep in mind when I go over this first video that I made on Helluva Boss. When I reviewed Helluva Boss initially, I only mainly watched the first season, and that's it. As of making this video, Helluva Boss has 2 seasons, and I think maybe there were like 4 or 5 episodes of season 2 that were out when I made my video on Helluva Boss, and I ended up not watching any of those episodes. I only primarily focused on the season 1 episodes, and maybe I watched like half of the first episode of season 2, but then I decided, yep, that's enough. I've watched enough of the show. I don't need to watch every single episode of the show in order to review it. Little did I know that Helluva Boss would be one of those shows where I needed to watch every episode in order to truly review it. Again, season 2 wasn't finished when I made my video on the show initially, but if I had known how different season 2 would be from season 1, I wouldn't have been as positive towards the show as I was in that video. And by positive, I mean mostly mixed, meh, average, which for Vivzy Pop standards, that's pretty damn positive. But alas, when I made my initial video on Helluva Boss, I only focused on season 1, and I completely ignored the at the time still running season 2. And after I made this video, I would just move on from Vivzy Pop and her cartoons. I thought I said everything that I ever wanted to say about Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss. There was quite literally no reason for me to go over either of these shows a second time. For the case of Helluva Boss though, something ended up happening that made me reconsider doing that. It's early 2025. It's around like, I don't know, May or so, April, I'm not sure. It's extremely late at night. It's about like 2, 3 in the morning. I can't sleep. I'm scrolling through YouTube on my phone, bored out of my mind, trying to find something to watch. And that's when I get recommended a video titled, Helluva Boss has the worst writing I've ever seen, or something along those lines. A link to this video will be in the description below because, you know, why not? The video was like an hour and 40 minutes long. It was a very long video, and I was in a bit of a hater mood that night, so I decided, you know what? Fine, I'll watch this video. I'll watch this guy talk about why Helluva Boss is a bad show, as if I already didn't do that myself. I click on the video, and this video goes through every single episode of Helluva Boss up to that point, from the 2019 pilot all the way up to Sinsmas. The video covered episodes that I didn't bother to watch when I reviewed Helluva Boss initially, episodes that weren't even released when I made my video on the show. And the more I kept watching the video, the more I realized, holy shit, I might have been too nice to this show initially. I might have been too nice. I might have been too kind. I was generous towards this show. There was always that small gut feeling inside of me that Helluva Boss was indeed as bad as Has Been Hotel, but I just couldn't prove it. And now, thanks to this video opening up my eyes as to what season 2 of Helluva Boss is like, I decided, you know what, at some point, I will watch and review season 2 myself to see how bad it is. And it's not just this video either. I would frequently get videos recommended to me talking about the show and how it fell off in quality with season 2. You have people that think the show was never good to begin with, however they acknowledge the show was less bad in season 1 when compared to in season 2. You have people criticizing the many problems with the show's writing and the themes that it has and that sort of thing. And it just kept making me more and more curious. How bad is Helluva Boss season 2 when compared to season 1? That was the question that I wanted answered. And so, because it's Halloween, because Helluva Boss focuses on hell and demons and whatever, I figured this would be perfect for Halloween. And so I spent an entire 2 days binge watching all 12 episodes of season 2. I didn't bother to rewatch any of the season 1 episodes as they were still fresh in my memory. And given one of the biggest reasons why season 2 of Helluva Boss is criticized, I don't think I need to rewatch season 1. So the story of Helluva Boss follows 3 demons, Blitzo, Millie, and Moxie, and a hot wolf girl named Luna. The only good thing about the show, I'll admit it. Helluva Boss is garbage, but Luna is a top tier furry waifu, alright? I gotta be real. I hate the fact that this peak character has to come from something so terrible, but whatever, there's nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. So you have these 3 demons and a hot wolf girl, and they run an assassination business. They are hitmen. Someone from hell could go up to these 4 and hire them to assassinate someone in the human world as a form of revenge. If a woman gets murdered in the human world and she gets sent to hell, she can go down to these 4 and hire them to assassinate the person who murdered her as revenge. I will not deny, this is a great premise. This is a very fun, unique premise that I think has a lot of potential. The first 2 episodes of the show, the 2019 pilot and Murder Family, although they're not very funny, they do give me an idea of what this show could be like. They show me the potential that this storyline could have and how it could be a really fun story. And so you would think that this would be a fun action comedy about 4 demon hitmen, well, 3 demon hitmen and a hot wolf girl who doesn't actually partake in the assassinations, and instead she just mostly works back at the office. You have this story, and I think it has a lot of potential to work. I think this is a great storyline that has a lot of potential to be fun. Here's the problem. They do nothing. I repeat, fucking nothing with this premise. This amazing, great, potentially fun premise is completely wasted. It's treated like a secondary thing for this show. In order to assassinate people in the human world, Blitzo steals a magical book, a grimoire, I think is what they call it. I don't know. I'm calling it a book. I don't care. He steals this book that allows him to enter the human world alongside Moxie and Millie. However, he steals this book from a demon prince named Stolas, and he gets caught. And so, in order to ensure that he can keep the book as long as possible, Blitzo more or less becomes a sex slave for Stolas. And then as it turns out, Stolas has a wife named Stella and a daughter named Octavia. And it doesn't take long before they both become aware of this whole thing. The main focus of the show is on the relationship between Blitzo and Stolas, and the demon assassin stuff is a secondary thing, when it should be the other way around. I don't know how you can it up this badly. Why would you come up with this great, creative, fun premise and then have it be like a secondary thing in favor of prioritizing generic romance bullshit? It doesn't make any goddamn sense to me at all. Of the 12 season 2 episodes, only 2 episodes, and maybe a 3rd episode, I don't know, only 3 of them focus on the demon assassin's plotline. Unhappy Campers, Ghost Screwers, and Sinsmas. That's it. Those are the only 3 episodes that focus on the demon assassin's plotline. I don't even know if Sinsmas counts. For Sinsmas, it's barely in the episode. It's barely in the story. And so I'm not even sure if it really counts, to be honest. Now, I remember reading something that originally Stolas was intended to be like a villain for the show, maybe the main villain of the show, and there is a bit of this villainous feel to him in the early episodes, and I think this whole relationship thing could be redeemed. No, that's not a Has-Been Hotel reference, I'm sorry. I think this could be redeemed if they had it be like Stolas as a villain. I've seen a lot of people say that like, oh, Stolas abuses Blitzo, they're in an abusive relationship, whatever, and it's like, that could be interesting. That could be an interesting idea, an interesting concept. And then they completely abandon it by turning Stolas into a good guy, more or less. Portraying the relationship between him and Blitzo as being a good thing, which makes it nowhere near as interesting as it could possibly be. Now, I've seen a lot of different conflicting sources as to why they decided to change Stolas from being a villain. Apparently, the fans of the show liked the idea of him and Blitzo being in a relationship for some reason, and so they decided to change it because of fan service. I think maybe it was like Vivian Medrano herself, or someone that was involved with the creation of the show. Like, I think one of the voice actors, I'm not sure, they thought it was a good pairing, and so they decided, you know what, let's show this off as a good thing, thereby making the story even less interesting than it should be. Even less interesting than it already is. Reminder, this is supposed to be a show about demon hitmen. You have a great premise, and you decide to do nothing with it. Now, something that I initially praised the Helluva Boss for was the fact that it seemingly didn't retain the same flaws that Has-Been Hotel had, and if there were any flaws that were shared between the two, they were there to a far lesser extent for Helluva Boss when compared to Has-Been Hotel. One of the biggest problems that I had had with Has Been Hotel was the style of humor that it had. I remember before watching Has Been Hotel, I would see a lot of people make memes that are like, if this random thing was made by VivziePop, if SpongeBob or whatever was made by VivziePop, and it would just be like non-stop swearing galore. F-bombs and sex jokes galore. And I initially thought that those memes were just hyperbole. I thought it was just, they're memes, they're jokes, they're not to be taken seriously. I thought they were overreactions, hyperbole. And then I actually watch Has Been Hotel, and I am astonished to find out the humor in this show is exactly like that. It's just, haha, it's funny, the characters say the F word a million times. It's funny, the characters make a million sex jokes, and that's it. It is the most painfully unfunny thing that I've ever seen, and you want to know what makes it even worse? They try to have serious moments in this show. Has Been Hotel is a comedy, or at least it tries to be one, but there's also moments where it tries to be super serious and dramatic. And the problem is, these super serious, dramatic moments are impossible to take seriously because of how awful the comedy is. I don't care about the serious moments in question, like the themes regarding them. I don't care like what themes are they tackling. I don't care about the execution of the serious dramatic moments themselves. That doesn't matter when the humor is this unfunny. The controversial abusive relationship between Angel Dust and Valentino, I am unable to care about it or take it seriously, regardless of how it's executed, because I get reminded this is the same show that thinks saying the F word and the B word a trillion times is funny, and that prevents me from ever taking this seriously. That prevents me from looking at this and caring about it. And I know that's an awful thing for me to say out of context, but I'm sorry, that's how I feel. And then we move on to Helluva Boss, and initially with season 1, I thought Helluva Boss was better in this aspect. Yeah, the show wasn't very funny. I didn't really laugh all that much when I watched Helluva Boss season 1, but at least it felt like they were mildly trying with the humor. Ever so slightly, they were trying. And so as a result of that, the few serious moments that were within season 1, I was able to take them a tiny bit seriously. I was able to mildly care about them. And then we move on to season 2, and holy shit, it is a massive downgrade from season 1. All of a sudden, the swearing and the sex jokes become a lot more common. Every other second, there's a character saying the F word, there's a character saying the B word, that sort of thing. Every other second, there is some kind of sex joke included, and it gets very old very quickly. There's only so many times you can have the joke be haha pee-pee, haha horny. There's only so many times you can do that before eventually it gets old, it gets boring, and it gets stale. The constant sex jokes are moderately annoying and pretty unfunny in the first episode of season 2, and then by the time I'm halfway into season 2, by the time I'm like 6 episodes in, I'm just thinking, oh my god, we get it. The characters are horny. Can we have other jokes, please, for the love of God? Now, because season 2 almost completely abandons the demon hitman storyline, instead focusing on the relationship between Blitzo and Stolas, that means that there are a lot more dramatic, serious moments in the show as well. There are moments where, most of the time, it feels like the show doesn't want to be a comedy anymore. And so as a result of that, there are a lot more serious moments. There are a lot more dramatic moments in season 2 when compared to in season 1. The problem is, once again, it is impossible to take any of these moments seriously. It is impossible for me to care about any of these serious moments, because not only do I get reminded that this is the same show that thinks saying the F word a billion times is funny, but I also get reminded that like a minute or two from this serious moment, the show is going to go back into wacky, silly, haha mode. The show's going to go back into thinking, oh, it's funny because the characters make a lot of pee-pee jokes. It's funny because they say the B word. It's funny, guys. It's funny. And it just completely undermines and devalues whatever serious moments there are in the show. One of the early episodes of season 2 focuses heavily on Moxie's family, with his father being like this Godfather-esque mob boss. There's a scene in the episode where we get all of these flashbacks to his like relationship with his father when he was a kid, and it's revealed that like he's a pretty bad father to Moxie, and it's supposed to be a serious moment. I should take this seriously, and yet I don't. Not only do I not take it seriously, but I also don't care about it at all. Because 2 to 3 minutes before this super serious dramatic moment, the characters were constantly yelling out F-bombs and sex jokes just for the sake of cheap laughs. And then spliced in between these super serious dramatic moments, you have these little jokes included that make it even harder to take the serious moments seriously. So I guess there was this whole thing with Moxie where it's like, I guess he at one point was in love with this guy. I don't remember his name. I think his name was like Chad or something like that. I don't know and I don't care. And this guy is gay for Moxie. Moxie's bisexual. And his dad wants to have an arranged marriage between Chad and Moxie, which Moxie is against as he's happily married to his wife Millie. Also, at the very beginning of this episode, it's revealed that Millie was in a relationship with Chad as well. And she's like extremely angry just thinking about him, and then it's never acknowledged again for the rest of the episode. The episode focuses entirely on Moxie's relationship with Chad, and then it never once acknowledges Millie's relationship with Chad. What the hell happened between the two of these characters that caused Millie to be so angry at the beginning of the episode? It's never acknowledged. It's never explained. Top quality writing right here, man. Top quality writing. Anyways, getting back on topic, Moxie's dad mocks his son. Jesus, that's a tongue twister right there. For being bisexual, for being into both men and women. And so the two of them are alone, and there's like a quick scene where Moxie's dad pushes a button, and then you have all of these dildos, vibrators, whatever, pulsating out of the walls. The entire room is covered wall to wall, ceiling to floor with dildos, which is obviously Moxie's dad trying to make fun of him for being LGBT. And it's at this point where we're still in wacky, silly, funny mode, and then almost immediately, the show takes a sharp turn left and it becomes a super serious dramatic mode, where Moxie's dad ends up slapping Moxie, and then we get all of the flashbacks showing, uh-oh, Moxie's dad is a terrible father, and it's very clearly supposed to be something that I should take seriously. I should be taking all of this seriously, and yet I'm unable to, because, again, this is the same show that thinks saying the F word a billion times is funny. And then the flashback ends, Moxie leaves the room, and then we have like an establishing shot of the room that Moxie's dad is in, and you have all of these dildos all over the wall, very clearly intended to be a joke, in the middle of what is supposed to be a serious moment. It ruins any tension. It ruins any chances of the viewer watching this and taking it seriously. And so you would think like after this, the show would go back into happy, silly, funny mode. But no, we're still in super serious, dramatic mode. Moxie goes up into the room that he's assigned to stay in. He opens it up. He sees that the room is covered with pictures of Chad. And he's like, oh, come the on, or something like that. For sake, I'm not sure. He says something along those lines. And there you go. You have another brief joke included in this serious moment, completely ruining the tension. And then just like that, we are immediately back into super serious dramatic mode. It doesn't work. It's awful. The tonal shift doesn't work at all. Every single one of the 12 episodes suffers from this awful tonal shift. Not once does it ever feel natural, the transition going from the comedy to the drama. It always feels abrupt and out of nowhere. To give you another idea of how bad the tonal shift is, let's go over the aforementioned Ghost Screwers episode, which, in hindsight, yeah, I could have come up with a better way to censor the episode's name, but I prefer to be consistent, so I apologize. As I mentioned before, this is one of the very few episodes of Season 2 to focus on the demon hitman plot that the show is supposed to have. You have Blitzo and Millie teaming up together to investigate this haunted hotel in order to take down the ghost haunting it, with Millie believing that this is what Blitzo needs after the breakup he had with Stolas a few episodes prior. Midway into the episode, Blitzo and Millie split up, and then Blitzo has like, I don't know what the hell this is, a realistic depiction of a panic attack. I don't know, animation is cinema. He hallucinates his mom, who, I guess she's dead, I don't know. Next thing you know, Millie comes across Blitzo and tries to confront him, only for Blitzo to start bawling about how he's a horrible person and how he makes the lives of everyone around him worse by just simply being there. And this is stuff that I'm supposed to take seriously. I should take this stuff seriously. I should care about this stuff, and instead, I don't. Because just 2 minutes before this same character in this same episode was constantly making jokes about how he was gonna have sex with the ghost haunting this hotel. With that in mind, I found it near damn impossible to take any of this seriously. Combine that with the fact that, for all I knew, 2 minutes after this super sad, serious scene, the show would go back to being, haha, Blitzo wants to have sex with the ghost haunting the hotel. And it's like, does the show want me to take this seriously or not? Does the show want me to care about this stuff or not? This is genuinely some of the worst tonal shifts I've ever seen in anything ever. This is Thor Love and Thunder on crack right here. I have to make it very clear that you can absolutely mix comedy and drama together. You can have a show be a funny, silly comedy and then also have it have dark, serious moments in it. It is entirely possible. I'm not gonna act like, oh, it's a bad idea. The problem is not the fact that they're mixing comedy and drama together. The problem is the way that they mix comedy and drama together. It doesn't work. It feels way too abrupt, and it makes me think, what is this show trying to be? What does this show want to be? Does it want to be a funny, silly comedy about demon hitmen who make a lot of sex jokes? Or does it want to be a super serious drama about the relationship between a bird and a demon? It tries to be both at the same time, and it fails at being both at the same time. This show has an identity crisis. It doesn't know what it wants to be. I remember reading something that apparently one of the biggest inspirations for Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss is, and I'm not joking when I say this, BoJack Horseman. And bizarrely enough, I never thought I would ever say this, I can kind of see where she's coming from with this. I can very slightly see where the inspiration comes from. One of the reasons why BoJack Horseman is so beloved when compared to other adult cartoons is its blend of comedy and drama. The show, for the most part, is a funny comedy. However, there are several moments in the show that are much darker and more serious and depressing. This isn't a 100% pure comedy, and it works perfectly. The blend of comedy and drama works for BoJack Horseman. And part of why it works is because BoJack Horseman has this magical thing called good writing. The jokes are actually funny. Unlike 99% of adult cartoons, BoJack over here doesn't rely extensively on swear words and sex jokes in order to be funny. There are actual jokes in this show, and they are actually funny. And so as a result of that, that allows you to take the dramatic, depressing moments a lot more seriously. When the show is a comedy, you're able to laugh at it. When the show is a drama, you're able to take it seriously. It's perfect. I could see why Vivian Medrano would want to do something like that with her shows. I can vaguely see the BoJack influence on both of these shows, as bizarre as it might be for me to say. However, and this is something that I'm sure all of y'all were waiting for me to say, the difference in quality between BoJack Horseman's writing and Has-Been Hotel / Helluva Boss's writing, the difference between how BoJack Horseman executes this versus how Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss executes this is fucking night and day. In BoJack Horseman, they actually try with the comedy. The show is actually funny and well written. In Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss, the humor is just swearing and sex jokes, and that's it. Significantly more immature and juvenile when compared to BoJack's style of humor. It's like Vivian Medrano had no idea how to convey that these shows were not for kids and that they're for adults, and so she decides excessive swearing and sex jokes, that's the way to go. Even though there are tons of different ways to properly convey that something like Has-Been Hotel is not a kid's show, it's a show for adults. The show takes place in hell, for f***'s sake. The show has demons and sinners and whatever as the main characters. A key part of Has-Been Hotel's storyline is that the angels in heaven commit what is essentially side to the demons in hell. Nobody is going to mistake this for a Nickelodeon show. You don't need to have excessive swearing and sex jokes to convey that the show is for adults and not for kids. If anything, I think this show is a lot more appealing to kids than it is to adults because of how immature and juvenile the style of humor is. I cannot think of any actual adult that would watch this and find it funny. Like, someone that watches King of the Hill could watch this and think, what the f*** is this supposed to be? This is supposed to be for adults? This is like some immature 7-year-old's cartoon. I have gone on before numerous times about the style of humor that Vivzy Pop's cartoons have, but I feel like it is especially insulting for Helluva Boss Season 2. I swear, this wasn't as bad of a problem in Season 1. The constant swearing and sex jokes weren't there as much in Season 1 when compared to in Season 2. And then comparatively, I think Season 2 of Helluva Boss has more dramatic, serious moments in it when compared to Season 1 for both Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss. And none of the serious moments I am able to take seriously because of the awful humor, because of the raunchy, juvenile style of humor that this show has. Think of any of those like 90s, 2000s stoner sex comedies that we used to get, you know? Think of movies like, imagine something like American Pie, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Superbad, Pineapple Express, The Hangover, you know, imagine like any of those movies. Think of something like Dude, Where's My Car? Imagine if Dude, Where's My Car had super serious dramatic moments in it. They would stick out like a sore thumb, they would feel incredibly out of place, and they would be impossible to take seriously because of the style of humor that the movie has. That's what Helluva Boss is like. Helluva Boss wants to be a funny comedy where the characters say the F word a million times and they make a million PP jokes and whatever, but then it also wants to be a super serious, deep drama. And it doesn't work at all. It is awful. If you want your show to be a raunchy comedy full of excessive swearing and sex jokes, fine, that's one thing. If you want your show to be a super serious drama, fine, that's another thing as well. But you cannot have your show be both of these things at the same time. It doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter how good you think you could pull it off. You just can't. Comedy dramas can work, but I don't think raunchy comedy dramas can work at all. I'm trying to imagine what if something like Beavis and Butthead had serious dramatic moments in it, and how incredibly out of place they would be. That's what Helluva Boss is like to me. Also, I would like to apologize for comparing Beavis and Butthead to Helluva Boss. I am so sorry for disrespecting a 90s classic like that. Honestly, I would probably hate this show a lot less if it was either a fully bad comedy or a fully bad or mediocre drama. The fact that it tries to be both at the same time is what makes me hate it this much. In terms of comedy, this is no different from most other bad adult cartoons, and I've sat through a lot of bad adult cartoons, so I can verify that easily. If it weren't for the super serious dramatic moments, I guarantee you more people would be putting this on the same level as something like Alan Gregory, except Alan Gregory kind of tries with the humor. The super serious dramatic moments that are in Helluva Boss are what prevent people from putting it alongside something like Velma or Big Mouth. And I guarantee you, people would be a lot less generous towards this show if it was a pure bad comedy with zero dramatic serious moments. Most people can gaslight themselves into thinking this is better than your average adult cartoon slop just because of the serious moments. But I see through it, man. I see through it. I'm not gonna fall for it. Hell no. I know I've said this a million times, but I would have much rather had a show that extensively focused on the demon hitman storyline that the show is supposed to have. This could have been a fun action-adventure comedy going over how these demons try to assassinate people in the real world. The Ghost Screwers episode also acts as an explanation to how Blitzo met Millie, and while Millie is comforting Blitzo, we have all of these different flashbacks showing like the different missions and whatever that these demons go on, assassinating people, and it just makes me think even more about the show that we could have gotten. Why couldn't this have been the show? Why couldn't the show just stick to being a comedy? Why does it try to be a drama as well? Nobody gives a shit about the demon-bird relationship. It's boring and it's impossible to take seriously because of the show's immature style of humor. Why would you sacrifice a fun, creative premise for generic romantic bullshit? I don't get it. And then, as if that wasn't enough, there are songs in this show. Now, there were songs in season 1 as well, but not that many. I think there were only like 3 songs in season 1 and that's it. In season 2 though, every episode has a song. Every episode has a musical number. And it's like, I already don't care about the storyline for this show. I don't need musical numbers to make me care even less. Every time a song would come up, I would groan, open up a new tab, and do something else to distract myself from the song until it ended. What I said about Has-Been Hotel's songs, I guess could apply to these songs as well. They might not be objectively bad songs necessarily. They're not badly composed, they're not badly sung. I cannot be bothered to pay attention to the songwriting, so I cannot verify how good or how bad the songwriting is. But at the very least, I can tell y'all the singing isn't bad and the composition isn't bad either, so there's that, I guess. Now, something that I initially praised the Helluva Boss for when compared to Has-Been Hotel was the fact that it didn't feel bloated or cluttered when compared to Has-Been Hotel. One of the biggest problems that I had with Has-Been Hotel was how needlessly bloated and cluttered it was, especially for its first season. This was its first season, and we had like 20 different main characters all at once. We had too many different characters to focus on for one season, for the debut season no less. A lot of these characters would have been better off debuting in a later season, and some of these characters had no reason to be there. Like, thinking about it now in retrospect, what the hell does Nifty do in season 1? What is her purpose? What does she do in season 1? I'm sure maybe they'll give her a purpose. Maybe she'll actually be important to the storyline for season 2. But for season 1, she serves no purpose at all to the storyline besides being the funny, quirky, XD, lol random character straight out of 2012. Except this is a fucking 2024 cartoon. And then Helluva Boss in comparison I thought wasn't as bad in this aspect. This was back when I cluelessly thought the show was about demon hitmen and it wasn't a boring drama about the relationship between a bird and a demon. Obviously now I know better. Going into season 2 of Helluva Boss, the show now feels a lot more cluttered when compared to season 1. There are characters that barely appeared in season 1 that are more fleshed out in season 2, and there are characters that weren't in season 1 at all that are now introduced in season 2, which I will give credit for. I will give a little bit of praise for this. They don't include every single character into season 1. They only include a few of them into season 1, and then they'll introduce more in season 2. That's how it should go. And yet now I feel like it still feels bloated, even if they set up a few new characters in season 2, even if like a lot of these characters weren't in season 1. The first season didn't feel bloated or cluttered, and now season 2 feels bloated and cluttered, with way too many characters to care about. When I reviewed season 1, I only acknowledged there were 4 main characters and that's it. Blitzo, Moxie, Millie, and Luna. I don't know why, but at the time I didn't register Stolas as a main character. There were obviously other characters in the season, however these were the main characters that the show wanted you to focus on. Each character feels important, each character feels like they have a role, each character feels like they have a purpose. Even if it's not perfectly executed, at least it feels like they have a purpose. Moving on into season 2, and it's only really Blitzo and Stolas that are important for season 2 of the 5 main characters. Luna barely appears in season 2. She barely speaks, she barely appears at all. There's only like 1 episode out of the 12 episodes where she's important to the story. And it feels like such a bizarre thing to do, given how much more present she felt in season 1. It felt like she was important, she had a purpose, she was there for a reason. And then in season 2, she more or less downgraded into being a background character, even though she's one of the 5 main characters. Then again, maybe it's for the better that they completely underutilized Luna for this season, because even though I despise season 2, the only good thing that I will say about it is that it doesn't ruin the only good thing about Helluva Boss. I don't know why I'm complaining about the fact that Luna barely appears in season 2, because I know that if she was in every single episode, if she had a bigger, more important role, they would screw her character up completely. I just know it. Here's hoping they continue to underutilize her in season 3. And then Moxie and Millie have a bit more of a purpose. They are a little bit more present in season 2 compared to Luna, but not by much. They feel like side characters, even though they're part of the main 5 characters of the show. Moxie and Millie each have 2 episodes where it feels like they're important to the show. Moxie has X's and O's, I don't know how the hell you pronounce it, and Unhappy Campers, while Millie also has Unhappy Campers and Ghost Screwers. And that's it. These are the only episodes where these 2 characters are really all that important. 3 of the 5 main characters of the show are completely underutilized and barely really there, barely present in the show when compared to Blitzo and Stolas. I honestly think this is a wasted opportunity because I could see there being chemistry with these 4 characters. I look at both versions of the pilot, the 2019 pilot and the remade version that they made for the show's Amazon Prime Video debut, and then I look at the first proper episode, Murder Family, and I could see these 4 being fun characters. They do have a bit of chemistry, and it's such a shame that this chemistry is barely found in season 2, you know? It's like, it's almost like they should have stuck to the demon hitman storyline that the show was supposed to be about. What a crazy idea that would be, don't you think? Speaking of which, as it turns out, the demon hitman story is not the only concept in this show that is completely wasted. So So starting off, something that Season 2 focuses on a lot is Blitzo's backstory. In the very first episode of the season, The Circus, it's revealed that, indeed, Blitzo worked at a circus when he was a kid, working with someone named Fitzarelli. We'll get back to him in a little bit. Stolas, also as a kid, attends one of these circus performances and takes note of Blitzo's act, being the only one in the crowd that reacts positively to it. This episode establishes that Blitzo and Stolas actually met when they were children, something that is never alluded to at all in the previous episodes, nor is it ever acknowledged again in the subsequent episodes. You can make the argument that like, oh, they were kids here and now they're adults and a lot of things have happened since then and I doubt that they would remember each other. But I don't know, this just kind of feels like bad writing, which, I mean, that's not really surprising because this is Helluva Boss after all. But I feel like if you're going to establish these two characters met when they were kids, maybe make that a little bit more important and relevant to the story, instead of using this lazy cop-out excuse of, oh, they met when they were kids, but that was a long time ago, and so they don't remember each other when they re-meet again as adults. Instead of doing that, you could just have them acknowledge, yeah, they met before when they were kids. Just a few quick throwaway lines, and there you go, this plot hole is fixed. Also, in the first few episodes of the show, Stolas would make all of these explicitly sexual comments towards Blitzo, something that he would stop doing later on as the show progresses, but rewatching these early scenes make them a lot more uncomfortable knowing that these two met when they were kids. I don't know why it makes it more uncomfortable, but it just does. And it reminds me yet again that Stolas would be a lot more interesting as a character. He would be a lot better if he was a villain. This whole romance thing between Blitzo and Stolas would work a lot better, and it would be a lot more interesting if it was portrayed as a bad thing. Anyways, let's move on to Fizzarelli, Blitzo's circus partner. Who appears in, I believe, 2 of the 8 episodes of Season 1, and I think in both of them, it's established that there's something wrong between the two of them. The two of them don't like each other very much, and so it makes you wonder, how are these two characters connected? What happened between these two characters that make them not like each other? And then this aforementioned circus episode reveals that Blitzo and Fizzarelli used to work together at the circus. So they used to be on good terms, making you more interested as to what the hell happened between the two. And then we cut to a few episodes later. We have an episode where both Blitzo and Fizzarelli get kidnapped. And throughout the episode, they try to find a way out. And it's in this episode where it's revealed why the two of them can't stand each other. I guess Blitzo was jealous of all of the attention and fame Fizzarelli was getting. Everyone loved Fizzarelli, but no one liked Blitzo except for Stolas. And then the entire circus burns down. I don't remember if it was by accident or if it was deliberate. I don't remember at all. You might think it's unprofessional for me to not remember certain key details about the storyline, but again, this stuff is impossible to take seriously because of the style of humor that this show has. There's no reason for me to take any of this seriously when I know that 2 minutes after this stuff, the show is gonna go back to being haha, it's funny because they say the F word a lot. And so Blitzo's mom ends up dying in the fire. I think they might be brothers, Blitzo and Fizzarelli. Again, this is important stuff that I don't care about. I don't see any reason to pay attention to it. I don't see any reason to really treat it seriously, given the style of humor that this show has. Don't get mad at me, Vivian Medrano's the one with the immature sense of humor. And so as a result of this circus burning down and their mother dying, Fizzarelli and Blitzo hate each other. However, while they're escaping this place, the two of them eventually reconcile, and now they're on good terms. In the very next episode, they're officially friends again. They establish that these two characters have bad blood against each other. They establish that these two characters hate each other in season 1, as far back as the second, technically third episode of the entire show, Lululand. They establish that these two characters have bad blood against each other, and then they further establish this in a later episode of season 1, Aussies. And then they further establish in the circus that Blitzo and Fizzarelli used to be on good terms, making you question even more what happened between the two that caused them to hate each other. And then in episode 6, Oops, yes, that's the name of the episode. I don't know why it's the name of the episode, it just is. They officially reveal the reason why Blitzo and Fizzarelli have bad blood against each other, and then they immediately make up, and now they're on good terms again. Now they're officially friends. In the next episode, the two of them are buddies again. And all it does is just make me question, what the f*** is the point of establishing that there's bad blood between these two characters if you're gonna resolve it in the exact same episode that they finally explain what the bad blood between the two is all about? That is not good writing at all. It's already hard enough to take this stuff seriously because of the humor that the show has, but the fact that they reconcile, they eventually make up in the very same episode that all of this is finally explained, and most likely none of this stuff is going to matter in any of the future episodes of the show, in like season 3 or anything like that. It just makes me question, why even include this into the show in the first place? This would work so much better if you finally explain why these two hate each other, and then have the episode end off with them still hating each other. Save the whole thing of them making up and becoming friends again. Save that stuff for much later on. Don't just rush out this conflict and that's it. Don't do that. It is 100% possible to have this episode end with the two of them escaping from where they were kidnapped, and also still having them hate each other. You can have that happen. They escape from the place, and they still hate each other despite that. That's not impossible. You can do that. For whatever reason, they choose not to do that. And so there's even less of a reason to care about any of this than there already is. I understand that there's a long gap between when Fizzarelli first appears in the show and in this episode where they finally explain what happened between him and Blitzo, and also having the two of them reconcile. I understand there's a long gap between the two. I'm sure, like, when they introduced Fizzarelli into the show in Lululand, I doubt they had any ideas as to why Blitzo and Fizzarelli hate each other. But if you're going to establish that these two characters hate each other for a reason, let that reason sit in. Build up to the reason why these two characters hate each other, and then explain why the two characters hate each other, and then have that explanation sit in a little bit, allowing for it to be a lot more interesting, allowing for it to feel more impactful to the episode, to the storyline of the entire show. And then, after enough time has passed, you resolve it. You have the two characters make up and become friends again. You don't immediately have them reconcile in the same episode where you finally explain why they hate each other in the first place. That is awful writing. I'm sorry. Huh? What's that? You want even more potentially interesting concepts and ideas that are either completely wasted or poorly executed? Well, don't worry, because our queen Vivian Medrano has a lot more where that came from. Now, I'm sure we all know what the 7 deadly sins are, and in this show, you have 7 different characters that are all meant to represent each of the 7 deadly sins, which that is also a great idea. This is an idea that has a lot of potential. Of course, because this is Helluva Boss we're talking about, that potential is completely wasted. Now, so far, there's only been 3 of the 7 deadly sins that have had any importance, any relevance to the show's storyline, and so as a result of that, we're only gonna focus on them. I'm sure whenever season 3 comes out, they're going to further expand upon the 4 remaining sins, but for the time being, there's only 3 sins that are important to the show's story, so we're only gonna focus on them. The first sin that we're gonna focus on is Queen Bee. No, I cannot be bothered to pronounce her actual name. And, alright, fine, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This is a terrible character design. Finally, we're going to be talking about the character designs for Helluva Boss. Finally, we have reached that point. One of the biggest problems that I had with Has Been Hotel were the character designs. Not all of the character designs in Has Been Hotel are bad, mind you. I think like Charlie, for example, I think her design is fine. There's nothing wrong with Charlie's design. However, there are a lot of problems with the other character designs on the show. Number 1, there is a very limited color palette across the characters. Almost all of the characters on Has Been Hotel have the same color palette of red, white, and black, and that's it. It is not very appealing to look at. It is a bit of an eyesore combined with the completely red backgrounds that the show has. I understand that the show takes place in hell, but that doesn't mean every single location has to be red. Helluva Boss also takes place in hell, and yeah, there are moments where the backgrounds are just red and that's it, but there's also moments where they're in hell, but there's other colors besides red. So I have no idea why they were able to do it for Helluva Boss, but not for Has Been Hotel. To give a tiny bit of credit, it does seem like they're averting this whole thing with Season 2, which appears to have a big focus on Vox, the TV head guy, the only main character on the show who doesn't have red, white, and black as his primary color scheme, thereby making him one of the better character designs on the show by default, even if his design does retain other flaws that the character designs suffer from. But in Season 1, everything is just red, and that's it. As I've previously mentioned, Helluva Boss has a lot more variety in the color scheme. It's not just red, 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 there's a lot of other colors as well besides red. There are certain characters on the show, particularly 3 of the main characters, Blitzo, Moxie, and Millie, that all primarily have red, white, and black as their color scheme. And now that I think about it, if I knew nothing about these 3 characters, if I knew nothing about this show, I would assume that these 3 were siblings. I would assume that these were all related to each other, akin to like the Animaniacs or something like that. There is nothing about these character designs that would convey that no, this character is not related to these characters. There is nothing about these character designs that would convey that they're supposed to be husband and wife instead of brother and sister. But at the very least, there's a lot more variety in the color scheme for the characters in Helluva Boss when compared to in Has Been Hotel. However, some of the characters on the show suffer from the opposite problem of having way too many colors, and I mean way too many colors. And Queen Bee over here is a perfect example of a character that has way too many colors attached to them, which in all fairness I think could tie into another problem that I have with the Has Been Hotel character designs that Queen Bee over here shares. I think this design could be saved. I think there is potential for this character design to not be this bad looking. The problem is, once again, it is cluttered with unnecessary details that don't need to be there. Going back to the character designs in Has-Been Hotel, a lot of the characters have a lot of unnecessary details in their designs that they don't need. A majority of the characters on the show wear suits, and these suits have a lot of unnecessary details that don't need to be there. Not only does it make the show look very cluttered and bloated, but also I want to imagine it is a complete nightmare to try and animate these characters given how excessively detailed they are. Less is more. A lot of good character designs are very simplistic in nature. You look at characters like SpongeBob and Pikachu and whatever, and it's like their designs are very simplistic, and that allows for them to be a lot more memorable. And I want to imagine it would be a lot easier to animate these characters because of the very simplistic nature of their designs. Imagine if Sonic was cluttered with unnecessary details that didn't need to be there. Not only would it look absolutely ugly, but it would also be extremely hard to animate for the cartoons. It would be hard to animate, like, I don't know, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic SatAM, Sonic X, that sort of thing. It would be hard to animate because his design would be cluttered with unnecessary details. Again, Charlie is one of the only exceptions to this. Her design is not cluttered with unnecessary details. And yeah, she has the limited color palette that a lot of the other characters on the show suffer from, but she is the main character, so I guess it's okay for her. She gets a pass for it. And going back to Queen Bee's design, this design is unnecessarily cluttered. Honestly, I would argue having too many colors and an unnecessarily cluttered design is worse than having a limited color palette and an unnecessarily cluttered design. There are far too many details within Queen Bee's character design, and I don't think the design on its own is bad necessarily. Like, if you removed a lot of these details that don't need to be there, this design could be salvageable, but it's the fact that there's so much unnecessary crap on this design that's what completely ruins it. The biggest offender has to be this weird, like, lava lamp tail that she has, where you have all of these different colors, and they're all, like, very, like, gloopy looking, droopy, I don't know, very much akin to what you would see on a lava lamp. And I cannot imagine how insufferable it must be to try and animate this character, to try and animate this lava lamp tail that she has. Get rid of the lava lamp tail. She doesn't need that. There is no reason for her to have this. Also, finally, a lot of the characters on Has-Been Hotel suffer from same face syndrome. A lot of the characters on the show make this eating grin, copy and paste, cookie cutter. And something that I acknowledged when I initially reviewed Helluva Boss Season 1 was these characters don't have that eating grin. There aren't as many characters that make that face. There are a few characters, of course, namely Fizzarelli. Fizzarelli makes this face a lot, but overall, there aren't as many Helluva Boss characters that have this face when compared to Has-Been Hotel characters. None of the main 5 characters have this eating grin face. Thank you for that. Thank you. And Queen Bee is largely exempt from having this eating grin, so it might be redundant for me to bring it up when talking about her, but you know, I just wanted to bring up the 3 main problems that I have with the character designs in both shows. And lo and behold, Queen Bee has 2 of the 3 big flaws that the character designs have. And so overall, I give this character design a D-. Would still smash though, to be honest. Hey, speaking of which, I completely forgot, this character is supposed to be one of the 7 deadly sins. And so now you might be wondering, which sin is she supposed to be representing? I look at this blatant gooner bait furry design, and I think, oh, for sure, she has to represent the sin of lust, for sure. Well, guess what? That's not the case at all. Do you want to know which sin she represents? She represents the sin of gluttony. Yes, gluttony. Now let me ask y'all something. Where's the fucking gluttony in this character design. There is nothing about this character design that screams gluttony. The show does portray her as being a non-stop party girl consuming God knows how much alcohol, and so that's where the gluttony comes from. And yeah, obviously the way that these characters act should mirror the sins that they're supposed to represent. However, their designs as well should also convey the sins that they're supposed to represent as well. And there's nothing about this character design that screams gluttony. If I knew nothing about this show or this character, if the only thing that I knew about this character was that she represented one of the 7 deadly sins, and you asked me which sin did she represent, I would say lust. Because this is very clearly a furry gooner-bait character. Why is she not representative of the sin of lust? Where is the gluttony in this character design? If she doesn't represent the sin of lust, then who does? Who represents the sin of lust? Oh, you gotta be f***ing kidding me, man. Are we for real now? Are we for real? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ozzy. This is, without any hyperbole, the worst character design I think I have ever seen in any cartoon ever. I thought that Queen Bee's design was bad, however, it is salvageable. It is mostly bad, but it can be salvaged. This monstrosity, though, is beyond saving. This is a perfect example of what not to do when designing a character. This is the complete antithesis of everything that makes a character design good. It's just, what am I even looking at? What is this supposed to be? I can't even tell at all. It's just a mishmash of random things put together. The anatomy is all up and weird looking. I can't even tell what I'm looking at. It's awful. Why is the top half of the body so big, but then the head is so small? It looks terrible. Jesus, man. This is an incredibly specific niche reference from my childhood, but I remember when I was a kid, I owned Shrek on DVD, and there were a lot of different games that were on the Shrek DVD, and among these was this morph game, this character morph game, where you could create your own Shrek abominations. You could take the body parts for Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, and Lord Farquaad and mix them up together to create your own Shrek monstrosity. And that is exactly what this character design reminds me of. It reminds me of that really old Shrek DVD game where you can mix up the Shrek characters to create abominations. Very specific niche reference, I know, but it's the first thing that I thought of when I saw this character. And it's made even more baffling by the fact that somehow this character is supposed to represent the sin of lust. I don't know how. There is nothing about this character design that screams lust. There is nothing about this character design that screams any of the 7 deadly sins for that matter, but especially not lust. Why is the blatant furry gooner-bait character not representative of the sin of lust? Why is this thing representative of the sin of lust? I don't want to see a single one of y'all say, hear me out, because I swear, we will not be hearing you out, okay? We will not be hearing you out. Once again, the only thing that conveys Ozzy is supposed to represent the sin of lust is his personality, the way that he acts. And again, that is important, but I do think the design should also convey that he represents the sin of lust. This is the one time where I would have been okay with fan service. They could have made this like a Tumblr sexy man or whatever, and it would actually somehow be better than what we end up getting here. So Ozzy is in a relationship with, you guessed it, Fizzarelli. And a lot of the times, whenever these two characters are together, Ozzy would make these sexual, lustful, horny comments to Fizzarelli. He's extremely horny and he makes a lot of sex jokes. There you go. That's how you know this character represents the sin of lust. Unfortunately, this doesn't work as well as it should, because every single character on this show is horny and makes a lot of sex jokes. There's almost nothing to make this character stand out from the rest of the crowd in that aspect. If this was the only character in the show that was cracking sex jokes and was explicitly horny, then I guess it would be fine. It would be a different story. But no, Almost every single character does this. Blitzo does this a lot throughout the show. Stolas makes a lot of sexual jokes throughout the show. He might as well be representative of the sin of lust. What makes Ozzy different? What makes him special? Besides the fact that he somehow has a significantly worse character design than all of the other characters on the show, of course. And finally, we have Mammon over here, who is supposed to represent the sin of greed, and I guess his design is okay, actually. I think he has one of the better designs in the show. For one thing, unlike with Queen Bee and Ozzy, they convey that this character represents the sin of greed, not just with the way he acts, but also with his design, the way he looks physically. See, it's not that hard to do it. However, I feel like Mammon suffers from the opposite problem that Queen Bee and Ozzy have. Instead of being extremely cryptic and vague as to how this character is supposed to represent the sin that they're supposed to be representing, Mammon, I think, it's a little bit too obvious. It's a little bit too on the nose that, yeah, this character represents greed. I feel like the fact that he's green would be a good enough clue that this character represents greed. The cane with the dollar sign is okay-ish, I guess. Maybe you could keep that. But the little, like, dollar sign things that are hanging from his hat, there's no reason for them to be there. Now you're just making it too obvious. You're making it too blatant. I mean, in this case, I would much rather have something that's on the nose instead of something that's extremely vague and subtle. But still, there should be a balance. You don't want it to be too obvious, but you don't want it to be too cryptic either. So as it turns out, Fizzarelli works for Mammon. And surprise, surprise, Mammon exploits Fizzarelli for money. Go figure. If I were to describe Mammon's character in terms of his personality, in terms of the way he acts, that sort of thing, he is literally the exact same thing as Adam from Has-Been Hotel. The exact same kind of character. The whole thing with Mammon is he swears a lot, and that's funny because they're swear words. I know that applies to quite literally every character across both shows. However, I get reminded of Adam from Has-Been Hotel more than any other character. For whatever reason, he just reminds me of Adam. In the introduction for the episode that he makes his debut in, he's holding this, like, concert, I guess, talent show, I don't know what the hell it's supposed to be. And a lot of it is just, it's funny because he says the F word a lot, and that's it. There's one joke in this episode that came very, very, very close to actually being funny. So obviously Mammon's whole thing is he's kind of a douchebag. And so during this opening monologue, he goes on about how women can't be funny and whatever stuff like that. And then in the corner of the screen, it flashes written by Vivian Medrano. And then Mammon's like, anyways, moving on. And the credit immediately disappears. Now, when I first watched this episode, I wasn't really paying attention all that much to this scene. I was, but I wasn't mainly focusing on it. And I saw that for a split second. It kind of caught me off guard, and I was like, holy crap, there's no way. You couldn't make this up, man. I could have sworn when Mammon went on about how women aren't funny, women can't be funny, whatever, and the written by Vivian Medrano stuff comes up, I thought that was unintentional. I thought that, like, holy crap, you know, the complete lack of self-awareness would make it funny. And then I rewind it, and I see that the credit fades in, but it doesn't fade in completely, and then it disappears immediately as soon as Mammon says, anyways, moving on, whatever. And that's when I realized it was intentional. What could have been the only funny moment in Helluva Boss, and it's no longer funny, because it was intentional. And just in case anyone gets the wrong idea, yes, women can be funny. Unfortunately, Vivian Medrano is not funny. And if anything, the fact that this joke was intentional makes this even less funny. It's like Vivian Medrano is self-aware that she's not funny. She's self-aware that she doesn't know what it takes to make a good cartoon, let alone two of them. She's self-aware that her shows have the exact same garbage humor as shows like Big Mouth and Velma and whatever, and yet she gets praise rather than backlash online despite that. She's aware of all of that, and yet she makes no effort to improve at all. It's meant to be like a self-deprecating joke, I guess, but it doesn't work when Vivian Medrano actually is unfunny. Being self-aware that you're not funny doesn't work if you continue to be unfunny. I thought that this was gonna be funny because it seemed like it was unintentional, but the fact that they planned it on purpose, this was a deliberate joke. I mean, you know, I get it would be funny. It would actually be funny. If this was intentional, it would be funny if Vivian Medrano was funny. But unfortunately, she's not. Unfortunately, she thinks excessive swearing and sex jokes are the funniest thing ever. And so she makes sure to include as much of that into her cartoons as possible. But also at the same time, she wants to include super serious dramatic moments in these episodes. She wants these shows to be really funny, raunchy comedies where the characters swear and make a million sex jokes and whatever, but then she also wants these shows to be taken seriously. Make up your mind, Vivian. Make up your mind. You can't have your cake and eat it. Anyways, going back to Mammon's design, I think it's okay, however, it isn't perfect, and another problem that I have with it is the fact that it retains the same sort of like clown jester style as Fizzarelli. I've previously established that Fizzarelli works for Mammon, and Mammon exploits Fizzarelli for money. However, given the fact that both of these characters have this clown jester look to them, I could very easily assume that the two of them are related. I could very easily assume that the two of them are like brothers or something like that. There is nothing about either of these designs that would convey that these are two completely separate characters that are unrelated to each other, besides the fact that one works for the other, of course. Also, the eating grin that Mammon makes does not help matters out at all with that whole thing. Hello there, eating grin. Long time no see. But you know what? At least I can tell which sin he's supposed to be representing. At least I can tell, yeah, he's supposed to represent the sin of greed. I do think they made it a tiny bit too on the nose with the fact that he represents the sin of greed when it comes to his design, but at least they convey it with his design. I don't know why they could do it for Mammon, but they couldn't do it for Queen Bee or especially Ozzy. Maybe it was deliberate for Ozzy, you know? Maybe it was deliberate to have the ugliest character on the show be representative of the sin of lust. Maybe that was the purpose. I don't know. If that ends up being the case, if they deliberately made the character that's supposed to represent the sin of lust also be the ugliest character on the show, then that's actually genius, I'm not gonna lie. All will be forgiven if it turns out that this character is ugly on purpose. Sadly, I doubt that's the case. Now, as I mentioned before, there are only 3 of the 7 deadly sins that are relevant to the show's storyline so far. I'm sure that when season 3 comes around, they'll show off the remaining 4 sins. There is an episode later into the season where you see the sins all together, and there's like an extra sin that's there briefly. However, she doesn't talk, and honestly, I have no clue which one of the remaining sins they're supposed to represent. Knowing Queen Bee and Ozzy, this is probably going to be the sin that I least expect it to be. I don't know, when season 3 of this crap comes out, there's no chance in hell I'm ever gonna watch it. Sorry. Bro, how does SpongeBob unironically have a better representation of the 7 deadly sins than Helluva Boss? Unintentionally, I might add. How do you even do that, man? How do you even do that? Now, in case it wasn't obvious enough already, Helluva Boss is a show that takes place in hell. Helluva Boss is a show that has demons as its main characters. I know, Blitzo and Millie and Moxie and whatever are imps and not demons and blah blah blah. I really don't care. Demons, imps, tomato, it doesn't matter to me. However, something that I noticed the further I got into this season is that it seemingly doesn't matter at all that the show takes place in hell. There's an episode of the show that immediately follows this breakup that Blitzo and Stolas have, where Stolas attends one of these yearly Blitzo hate parties held by his ex. Yes, Blitzo has an ex, Verosica, I think is her name. She's like a demon pop star or something like that, I don't know. She only appears in like 3 episodes of the show and that's it. There's not really a whole lot for me to say about her as a character. I do find it kind of weird though, the fact that we have 2 characters in this show that more or less serve the same purpose. It might be redundant for me to bring this up considering the fact that Vivian Medrano, in addition to reusing character designs, also reuses character traits. As previously mentioned, Mammon and Adam from Has-Been Hotel are more or less the same character, but it still feels kind of weird to have 2 characters that are just very similar to each other in the same show, when you can instead just combine the 2 and have it be one character, a character that both represents one of the 7 deadly sins and is Blitzo's ex. And then the idea of the main character of the show at one point dating one of the 7 deadly sins could open up to some interesting ideas, but alas, that ends up not being the case at all. Anyways, Blitzo secretly attends one of these anti-Blitzo parties that Verosica holds every year. The 2 of them get into an argument about this. Verosica's like, "Oh, Blitzo, you're an awful person," and Blitzo's like, "Yeah, of course I'm an awful person. I live in hell. We all live in hell. Every one of us is an awful person." Which, you know, that is a good point, and because of that, it is naturally never brought up or acknowledged again for the rest of the argument. And it was at that very moment where I realized how unimportant it was that the show takes place in hell. The show could have taken place anywhere. It could have been a sci-fi cartoon. It could have taken place in outer space or like on an alien planet, and the main characters could all be aliens instead of demons, and almost nothing would really change. Nothing that's important at all. You could quite literally have the show take place on Earth in like a normal regular city and have the main characters all be humans, and almost nothing important would be removed by that. There's almost no reason at all to have the show take place in hell. To give Has-Been Hotel a little bit of credit, it actually felt like it was important that the show took place in hell. The show extensively focuses on Charlie trying to convince Heaven that demons can be redeemed. The show focuses on Charlie trying to convince the demons that they can be redeemed, they can go up into heaven. It actually feels important and relevant to the show's storyline. And then Helluva Boss just tells a story that just so happens to take place in hell. Very rarely is it ever important that the show takes place in hell. Very rarely does it actually matter. And I feel like there's a lot of wasted opportunities that could come from this. Maybe this was a deliberate choice to make. Maybe they wanted to keep this distinguished from Has-Been Hotel. Whatever the case may be, I find it to be yet another wasted opportunity to make it important that the show takes place in hell, to have it feel like the show takes place in hell for a reason, instead of just having it take place in hell for the sake of having it take place in hell. Again, I feel like the fact that the show takes place in hell could be a lot more relevant had the show focused on the... Yeah, you get what I'm about to say. There's no point in repeating it. I sound like a broken record at this point. Did I ever mention that all of the serious moments in this show are impossible to take seriously because this is the same show that thinks saying the F word a million times is funny? Because I just did. And now, for this next segment, we are going to enter some very, very, very risky territory. I gotta make sure not to say the wrong thing. I gotta make sure nobody gets the wrong idea from any of this. But this is something that I couldn't stop thinking about when I was watching season 2. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to talk about the LGBT representation in Helluva Boss. Now, right off the bat, I just want to say, it's not a bad thing to include LGBT representation into a cartoon. It's not a bad thing to include it into a movie. There is nothing wrong with having representation like that in your work. That is not a bad thing at all. I am not criticizing the fact that Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss both have LGBT representation in them. I am criticizing the way that the LGBT representation is executed. And okay, I kinda am criticizing the fact that there's LGBT representation in these shows, but not for the reasons that you think. I swear to y'all, I am not homophobic. Hear me out on this, please. Hear me out. Both Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss have a lot of LGBT representation in them. For the case of Helluva Boss specifically, a lot of the LGBT representation is further explored and fleshed out in Season 2. Obviously, you have the relationship between Blitzo and Stolas, but you also have the relationship between Fizzarelli and Ozzy, and the fact that Moxie is canonically bisexual. Now, it wasn't until I was fairly early on into Season 2 of Helluva Boss where I made a realization. A question popped up in my head that somehow never popped up when I initially watched and reviewed Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss Season 1. Why is there a lot of LGBT representation in two cartoons that take place in hell? Two cartoons that have demons and sinners and whatever as the main characters. How did Vivian Medrano think of this and not realize how tone deaf and disrespectful it is to the LGBT community? How did she not once think about how problematic this is? Now, obviously, homophobia is unfortunately a very rampant problem, especially in the current political climate that we live in. But there's a specific brand of homophobia that is especially common, and that is Christian homophobia. Christians who believe that LGBT people are evil and sinners and they go against God, they're gonna go to hell, that sort of thing. Now, I want to make this very, very clear. Not all Christians are like this. Not all Christians are homophobic. Not all Christians have a problem with the LGBT community. There are Christians out there that support the LGBT community. There are Christians that support LGBT rights, trans rights, that sort of thing. There's probably tons of LGBT Christians out there for all I know. There's 8 billion people in the world. Anything is possible. I am not religious, so I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I want to imagine God and Jesus would be supportive of LGBT people. Isn't the whole thing with Jesus is like Jesus loves everyone? You know, why would that not include LGBT people? Why would they be exempt from that? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The whole thing with Jesus is to love everyone, be kind to everyone, be nice to everyone. I don't see why LGBT people wouldn't be part of that. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who think otherwise. You have a lot of Christians who think that LGBT people go against God, go against Jesus, that sort of thing. And as a result of that, there are probably tons of LGBT people that get a sour taste whenever they think of Christianity or any religion for that matter. As I mentioned before, there are LGBT Christians out there, but there's also people that are LGBT that they have religious trauma. They have people in their family that are homophobic and Christian, and they hate on that LGBT person because they are who they want to be. They shame them, they mock them, they say that they're going to hell. They purposely exclude them from any and all family gatherings just because they commit the horrific crime of wanting to be a girl instead of a guy. And again, I feel like this sort of thing is a lot more frequent in the current political climate that we live in. I don't want this to become like overly political or anything like that, but I do have to acknowledge that things right now are really bad for LGBT people. And so I look at this cartoon that takes place in hell. I look at these two characters who are both gay for each other and are also demons at the same time, and I just think, this is in such poor f***ing taste, seriously. Like, I don't know how Vivian Medrano came up with this and didn't see anything wrong with it. How do you do something like this and you fail to see the problem with doing it? Explain that to me. Vivian Medrano created 2 cartoons. Yeah, not 1, but 2 cartoons that unintentionally reinforce a hateful, bigoted stigma against LGBT people. Emphasis on unintentionally. I am not accusing Vivian Medrano of being homophobic or anything like that. I am not accusing Vivian Medrano of being the second coming of J.K. Rowling or anything like that. Vivian Medrano is bisexual. I seriously doubt that there were any bad intentions behind including any sort of LGBT representation into these 2 shows. And yet, it just rubs me the wrong way because of the subject matter of these 2 shows, because of the setting of these 2 shows, because of the characters of these 2 shows, the species that they are. I look at something like Has Been Hotel, and something that, in retrospect, I should have criticized Has Been Hotel for, is the fact that they never go over why a lot of these characters are in hell in the first place. Charlie, Lucifer, and Maggie get a pass for this because they actually explain Maggie's backstory. She was a fallen angel. She used to be an angel from heaven. And then Lucifer is, well, I mean, come on, he's Lucifer. And then Charlie is Lucifer's daughter, so, you know, nepotism. She gets a pass. It's fine for her. But then on the other hand, it's like, why is Alistair in hell? Why is Serpentius in hell? Why is Angel Dust in hell? What caused all of these characters to end up in hell instead of heaven? I know that Serpentius gets redeemed at the end. He ends up in heaven. But what caused him to go to hell initially in the first place? None of it is ever explained at all. Now, in all fairness, this is stuff that they could go over in season 2 of Has Been Hotel, but I don't know, man. This feels like the kind of thing that they should have explored in season 1. There are certain things that are in season 1 of Has Been Hotel that they could have just explored in season 2 instead. And then something like this, the origins as to why a lot of these characters are in hell in the first place, they could include that into season 1. I'm bringing this up in regards to Angel Dust, who is a very explicitly LGBT character, arguably the most blatantly LGBT character across either show, and he's in hell, not heaven. And they never once explain the reason why he's in hell. Yeah, I don't think Vivian Medrano really thought this one through. They could have very easily included an explanation for why this character is in hell. Even if it's just a quick throwaway line, at least it would be something. But no, there is no explanation given as to why he's in hell in none of the episodes of the show. Maybe that'll change for season 2, but this is something that they should have explored in season 1. And this wouldn't be all that concerning if it weren't for the fact that this is a very explicitly LGBT character, combined with the hateful, bigoted stigma that LGBT people have to face on a daily basis. And just like that, the unfortunate implications become a lot stronger. Granted, again, they're unintentional, but still. I would also go as far as to say that the LGBT representation in the show isn't all that well done. As I've mentioned numerous times before throughout this video, Helluva Boss primarily focuses on swearing and sex jokes for humor. Let's take some time to focus on those sex jokes. A lot of times the joke is just haha Blitzo is horny, Blitzo makes pee jokes, Stolas is horny, Stolas makes pee jokes. You think about Chad from that one episode I mentioned earlier, and a lot of the times the joke is that he's extremely horny for Moxie. You look at Fizzarelli and Ozzy, and a lot of the times the joke is they're horny for each other. The joke is sex. That's it. That's the joke. It almost feels like, again, I'm not accusing Vivian Medrano of anything, but it feels like Vivian Medrano looks at LGBT stuff as being like a and that's it. She doesn't look at it as a normal thing. She treats it like it's a sexual thing. Being LGBT is inherently sexual. And again, it's the same thing with Angel Dust in Has Been Hotel, where a lot of times it's just, yeah, it's funny because he's horny. It's funny because he makes pee jokes. It's funny. I think Charlie and Maggie are the only LGBT representation in either show that's actually treated like it's a normal thing. There's no unfunny, horny sex jokes relating to these two or anything like that. It's treated like a normal, healthy relationship. It doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to rely on raunchy sex jokes. And yet a lot of the LGBT representation is just that. It's funny because the characters talk about pee-pees a lot. It's funny because they're horny. You combine this with the tone-deaf decision to have LGBT representation in a cartoon that takes place in hell, and I'm sorry, but this is not good LGBT representation. This doesn't even come close to what good LGBT representation is. It doesn't matter how good the intentions were behind including the LGBT representation in these cartoons, when number one, it is incredibly tone-deaf from a conceptual perspective, and number two, it just feels very it feels like Vivian Medrano treats it as a cheap way to make sex jokes, and so the execution of the representation is awful as well. I can't believe I've never seen anyone else criticize either of these shows for this, but you know what? I'm proud to be the first one to point this out. Someone had to point it out, and that person just so happened to be me. And now I become a lot more scared for something that could very easily happen at some point in the future. So I remember reading something that very recently there was a failed attempt to boycott Netflix amongst right-wing people, amongst Elon Musk and Twitter and that sort of thing, over this one cartoon that they have. Now, I have never heard of this show before in my entire life. I don't know anything about it. This show came out in like 2021, 2022, I don't know. It only lasted 1 or 2 seasons. It got canceled around 2022 or so, maybe 2023, I'm not sure. The point is, this show ended years ago. There are no new episodes coming out for this show. Now, even though I've never heard of this show before in my life, something that I found out about it is that it has LGBT representation in it. It is very explicitly LGBT, which, you know, that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. I gotta be real, I don't like the art style for this show. I don't think the show looks all that good visually, but that has nothing to do with the LGBT representation. You can have LGBT representation in your cartoon and also have it be visually appealing at the same time. That's entirely possible. I'm just saying. And there was like this failed attempt to boycott Netflix over this show, and apparently the creator of this show was harassed online and they got sent death threats and whatever over this whole thing, which I have to make this very clear. I do not support that at all. That is an awful thing that nobody should ever have to go through. All of this over a Netflix cartoon that ended back in like 2022 or so. A short-lived 1 season long cartoon. I watch Helluva Boss Season 2. I look at all of the tone-deaf LGBT representation in this show, and then I think about this whole recent failed Netflix boycott, and it just makes me think, Please God, let's not have right-wing people ever find out about either of these shows. Please God, I don't want Elon Musk or anything like that. I don't want Ben Shapiro to find out about either of these shows. Not only will it make things worse for LGBT people, but it will also make things worse for people who legitimately hate these two shows, like I do. People who have genuine problems with both of these shows. And so the last thing that I want in my life is for these two shows to go through the Snow White effect. Now some of you might be wondering, what is the Snow White effect? Well, you see, the Snow White effect is when an objectively bad piece of media becomes impossible to criticize because of the loud minority of people that hate on it for the wrong reasons. This effect is named after Disney's live-action remake of Snow White, which, by all accounts, is a horrible movie, one of the worst movies of 2025 easily, and yet it is very hard, if not near damn impossible, to call it that because of the large amount of people that hate the movie for the wrong reasons. If you plan on making a negative review of this movie, and you have actual valid reasons as to why you don't like the movie, instead of just, oh, girl said she doesn't like old movie, how dare she, f***ing woke DEI propaganda. Like, if you have actually good reasons to say that the movie is bad, be careful, because by making a negative review of the Snow White remake, you run the risk of either attracting people that also hate the movie, except they hate it for anti-woke reasons, or people that will assume that you are anti-woke yourself just because you don't like the movie, just because you think the movie is bad. And then you have the inverse, an objectively good piece of media that is impossible to praise because of the loud minority of people that love it for the wrong reasons. I call that the Fight Club effect. One of the best movies ever made, and it is hard for me to call it that because of the large amount of people that think Tyler Durden is the good guy. Anyways, I'm getting way off topic, I apologize. I honest to God hope that none of this happens to Has-Been Hotel or Helluva Boss. I don't want either of these shows to become objectively bad cartoons that are impossible to criticize. I don't want anti-woke grifters to find out about these shows. I don't want Elon Musk or Ben Shapiro or whatever to find out about these shows. I don't want right-wingers to find out about these shows, because I know that they're going to make criticizing both of these objectively terrible cartoons much harder than it needs to be. These people are going to look at the fact that these two shows take place in hell and they have LGBT representation in them despite that, and they're going to use that as proof. They're going to use that as ammunition for the whole LGBT people are evil and satanic bullcrap that is not true at all. Again, not only will it make things even worse for LGBT people, but it will also make things even worse for people who legitimately hate both of these shows. All of a sudden, you're gonna start getting more and more people who will try and defend these two objectively badly written cartoons just to spite these people. And it's like, you do realize you can spite and make fun of the right-wing anti-woke grifters without simultaneously defending the objectively dog shit media. You do realize that, right? You do realize that. I'm telling y'all, as much as I hate to admit it, it is practically inevitable. The anti-woke right-wing grifters and whatever, Elon Musk, Ben Shapiro, eventually they're gonna find out about both of these shows, and they're gonna get their panties in a twist about the fact that, like, oh, there's LGBT representation in these two cartoons that take place in hell. And then there's just like a million different things that are gonna happen as a result of that. The second most annoying people in the world, the most annoying being the right-wing anti-woke grifters, characters, the second most annoying people in the world, are going to try and defend both of these objectively terrible cartoons just to spite the anti-woke weirdos, even though you can simultaneously hate the anti-woke weirdos and also hate the objectively bad media as well at the same time. You get nothing out of defending Helluva Boss just because right-wing people hate it, I promise you that. You can hate both at the same time. The hateful stigma of, oh, LGBT people are satanic, it's gonna become much bigger, things are gonna escalate further, things will get so much worse for LGBT people, and hopefully there will be a few people, including Vivian Medrano herself, that'll open up their eyes and realize, you know, maybe it was actually kind of a bad idea to include LGBT representation in two cartoons that take place in hell. Maybe it was a bad idea to have an explicitly LGBT character like Angel Dust in hell. Maybe it was a bad idea to not have any LGBT characters in heaven. And that's something I gotta bring up as well. There's like 3 main characters that are in heaven. There's Adam, I think there's like 2 girls as well, I don't know. And like none of them are LGBT as far as I'm aware. And then you have like the 4th guy who's voiced by the Fall Out Boy singer that they're gonna introduce him in season 2. And he's probably not gonna be LGBT either. Seemingly none of the heaven characters are LGBT, which only makes this even more suspicious looking. Is it really that hard to create a transgender angel? Is it really that hard to do that? Is it really that hard to create a non-binary angel? Do they have to be represented by the demons and not the angels? I'm not looking forward to when anti-woke people find out about either of these shows. I'm not looking forward to it at all. I know that it's going to be a complete and utter disaster. Let's say Ben Shapiro finds out about Has-Been Hotel shortly after it came out at the beginning of 2024, and he makes a video calling it woke and whatever, saying that it further shows that LGBT people are satanic, that sort of thing. And then I end up making my search for the worst cartoon on Has-Been Hotel several months later. I will become a lot more nervous, a lot more scared to make this video, because I know that this video will either attract anti-woke people who hate this show for homophobic reasons, or people that will assume that I'm homophobic because I think this show is unfunny and poorly written, neither of which have anything to do with the LGBT representation in the show, by the way. And I cannot let that happen. Under no circumstances will I let this become something that's impossible to criticize. I shouldn't have to silence myself from reviewing bad media just because of a loud minority of annoying people online. God, this is something that I've been thinking about nonstop recently. I just can't stop thinking about how like some idiot in 2016 was like, hey, let's make a Ghostbusters movie where they're all women just for and giggles, just because, you know, why not? And then unintentionally with this movie, it ends up ruining media criticism as we know it. All of a sudden now, you have people complaining about wokeness and DEI and all this other non-existent crap. No longer are you able to just normally criticize a movie. And it pisses me off to no end. And from what I've heard, Ghostbusters 2016 is a legitimately pretty bad movie, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they're women. I've heard it is a genuinely bad movie. However, if I ever made a negative review of it, I will either attract anti-woke people that hate the movie for misogynistic reasons, or people that think that I'm misogynistic just because I criticize the movie. And so the simple solution would be to not review any of this stuff, but that's pretty hard for me to do, given the fact that I'm a reviewer, and given the very strong hatred that I feel towards these two objectively bad cartoons. And I refuse to keep the hatred that I feel for these two shows silent. I refuse to keep it all to myself. The moral of the story is, when you make a cartoon that takes place in hell and it has demons and sinners and whatever as the main characters, don't include LGBT representation into that cartoon, regardless of the intentions behind including the LGBT representation, and regardless of the execution of the LGBT representation itself. It's still in very poor taste. It is still extremely tone deaf, and you will unintentionally be making the lives of LGBT people worse by doing so. And if the cartoon ends up being bad for reasons that have nothing to do with the LGBT representation, then you're just making the show even harder to criticize than it should be, because the LGBT representation could be used as an easy get out of jail free card, making your show immune and exempt to all criticism, so that if anyone criticizes your show for having bad writing or unfunny, immature humor, some idiot could be like, oh, you hate it because you're homophobic, you hate it because there's LGBT representation, you probably watch Ben Shapiro, you homophobic bigot. You know, it's like, nobody wants that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. If you want to include LGBT representation into a cartoon, that's fine. But don't do it for a cartoon that takes place in hell. I don't know how Vivian Medrano never once put two and two together to realize how tone deaf and problematic this is. And there are ways to keep the LGBT representation in both of these shows without having it be problematic or tone deaf. Give these characters backstories as to why they ended up in hell in the first place, especially for Angel Dust, arguably the most explicitly LGBT character in either show. Because when you have this blatantly LGBT character in hell and not heaven, and the show never explains why he ended up in hell and not heaven, yeah, that can raise some very unfortunate implications. Unfortunate implications that could be easily prevented if the show explained why he's in hell and not in heaven. Alternatively, they could just add LGBT characters into heaven in addition to hell. Again, there's only like 3 to 4 main characters for heaven in Hazbin Hotel, and none of them are LGBT. It cannot be that hard to create a new character, an angel in heaven that's transgender as well. That cannot be hard to do at all. That's literally like, that should be the easiest thing ever to do. If you could do it for the demons in hell, you could also do it for the angels in heaven. It cannot be that hard. You include a few LGBT characters into heaven, and boom, all of a sudden this becomes a lot less tone deaf and problematic. It's literally as simple as that. Just put a couple transgender angels into heaven. It's not that hard. There are ways to prevent the LGBT representation in either of these shows from coming off as tone deaf or problematic without going the extreme route and removing all of the LGBT representation, making every character straight. There are ways that you can keep the LGBT representation and not have it feel disrespectful. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, neither of these shows do that, and I don't know why. They just don't, and it pisses me off. It might seem very hard to believe, but there are good things that I can say about Helluva Boss. There are redeeming qualities to it. They obviously aren't enough to save the show, but at least I can acknowledge there are a couple good things about it. Number 1, Luna. Number 2, the fact that Luna is completely underutilized in Season 2, meaning that they don't have to bastardize her character. Number 3, the voice acting is fine, I guess. There's nothing wrong with the voice acting. There's nothing really that I can say about it, but, you know, it's not bad, I suppose. I know that Moxie has the same voice actor that voices Zim from Invader Zim and Billy from Billy and Mandy, and I'm not gonna lie, I think there is potential for this character to be funny because of that. When I initially reviewed Helluva Boss, I acknowledged that there was one funny joke, and that's it. One funny joke and nothing else. and even after watching all 12 episodes of season 2, this still remained the only funny joke in all of Helluva Boss, and it involved Moxie yelling out "mother effer," and I thought this was funny. It made me laugh a little bit. It didn't make me die of laughter, but I chuckled watching it. I guess it was just the idea of Invader Zim swearing that just made me laugh, you know? I really wish there were more moments like that in this show. Well, I mean, okay, there kind of is, but not in the way that I would hope. There's a scene in one of the season 2 episodes where Moxie is like, "Welcome to hell, B-word," and it's like, it should be funny. The idea of like Invader Zim saying the B-word, it should be funny. And yet it isn't, because every single character on this show talks the same way. Every single character has unnecessary swearing shoehorned in. The shock and surprise that should be there of hearing Invader Zim saying the F word or the B word isn't there, because every single character says it a million times. And as a result of that, it's not shocking or funny or anything like that. It ends up being nowhere near as funny as it could have been. I also think that Brandon Rogers, who voices Blitzo, I think does a good job at voicing this character. And again, it makes me think this character has the potential to be funny, and yet because of the quality of the humor in this show, I am unable to find this character as funny as I probably should find him. Then again though, I do remember hearing something that like apparently Brandon Rogers, he has like his own YouTube channel, and like he has the same style of humor as a lot of the characters on the show. He has the same sort of like excessive swearing is funny garbage. So yeah, I'm not sure if any of this could really apply to Blitzo when compared to Moxie. But overall, I think the voice acting is good. There's nothing wrong with the voice acting. It's none of the voice actors' fault that the show is complete garbage. You know, they're trying their hardest, anything for that paycheck. I don't blame them. I think the art can actually be really good from time to time. Much like with Hazbin Hotel, I don't think the art is perfect. I think there are flaws. There are problems with the art. However, I think that the art for the show is pretty good for the most part. Adult cartoons have a reputation for being really ugly and visually unappealing, and while I wouldn't call Hazbin Hotel a super good looking visually appealing cartoon, it's also not The Prince. It's not Legends of Chamberlain Heights, you know, I'll give it that. And it's the same thing with Helluva Boss. I feel like the art in Helluva Boss is better than in Hazbin Hotel, if that makes sense. While I was working on this video, I would go back to a few of the season 1 episodes, and it was crazy to me looking at how much the art would improve as the episodes went by. That was something that I thought was a little bit fun to do, to look at the art for Murder Family and then compare it to the art for Sinsmith. That was something that I liked doing. I like the fact that there's more variety in the color scheme, not only for the characters but also for the backgrounds, unlike with Hazbin Hotel. Again, I don't get it. Both of these shows take place in hell, and they also take place in the same universe. It's not like, oh, Helluva Boss is set in a different hell from Hazbin Hotel, because that would make no sense at all. So why does Helluva Boss have a bunch of colors in its setting besides the obvious red, but then Hazbin Hotel is just red, 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 and nothing else? What's up with that, man? What's up with that? Even with that in mind, though, I will also acknowledge that there are flaws with the character designs. You have characters like Fizzarelli and Queen Bee who have way too many colors in their color scheme, and their designs are also pretty damn cluttered with unnecessary details. And then you have Ozzy, which, I mean, it's Ozzy. I don't really know what I could say about this character design that I haven't already said about it before. Even with all of its flaws, I do think the art is pretty good in general, and I think it's better than Hazbin Hotel's art. There are moments in the show where I think it actually looks really beautiful. Like, I don't know what it is, but the ending scene of Sinsmith and the ending scene of season 2 in general, for that matter, where you have Blitzo and Stolas outside on this balcony, I think it actually looks really good. It's a very rare instance where the excessive red adds to it. It actually benefits from having this excessively red color palette. The whole scene has this like fuzzy glow to it. It has this like fuzzy glowy look to it, which I think does add to the way it looks. I think this ending scene looks amazing. I think it looks beautiful. And the last positive thing that I will say about Helluva Boss is that, again, there are great ideas in this show. There are interesting ideas and concepts in this show that are either poorly executed, like the 7 Deadly Sins, or completely underutilized, like the Demon Hitman, and I find that to be a massive shame. Back when it was first announced earlier this year, I made a video going over Has-Been Hotel Season 2, and how I wasn't going to be able to make a video on it in time due to my current video schedule, and instead, I would review it in early 2026. However, I would review Helluva Boss Season 2 to make up for it around September or October of this year. And then later, I decided to make it the Halloween special for this year. And then earlier this month, I started working on this video. I sat through all 12 episodes of Season 2, and the further I got into Season 2, the more I decided, you know what? No. I don't think I'm going to review Has-Been Hotel Season 2. I don't think I'm going to watch it at all. I don't think it'll be worth it. This was not an easy decision for me to do, but eventually I decided, you know what? I think it's the right thing to do. I can't stand any more of this crap. Enough is enough. I made a video going over this very thing, explaining my decision. I hated Season 2 of Helluva Boss so much that I actively refuse to watch or review Has-Been Hotel Season 2. I don't care how it turns out when compared to Season 1 of Has-Been Hotel or both seasons of Helluva Boss. I don't care. I'm not watching it, and I'm not reviewing it. I'm tired of being nice to Vivian Medrano. I'm tired of pretending that Vivian Medrano can improve the quality of her cartoons. I'm tired of pretending all of this stuff, genuinely. I didn't know what to expect going into Season 2. I saw a lot of people say that it was really bad when compared to Season 1, but I had no idea how bad it would be. And lo and behold, it ended up being even worse than I could have possibly expected. It's such a shame that Season 1 is mostly mediocre, and then I went into Season 2 hoping that it would be better, it would be an improvement, it would be an upgrade, because sometimes this sort of thing happens. There are shows where the first season is good but not amazing, you know, it's kind of okay, it's kind of like a black sheep season, and then all of the subsequent seasons improve and the show becomes much better on. And instead, Season 2 is such a massive downgrade. Season 2 is such absolute dog shit when compared to Season 1. All of the faint praise that I gave to Season 1 gone in Season 2. It was just 12 episodes of pain and misery. 12 episodes of the unfunniest comedy I have ever seen in my entire life. 12 episodes of thinking, oh, it's funny because they say the F word and they make a lot of pee-pee jokes and that's it. That's the joke, guys. That's funny. 12 episodes of constant out-of-place, serious, dramatic moments that clash awfully with the unfunny humor. 12 episodes that I personally felt insult my intelligence, because this show tries to have these serious moments that I'm supposed to care about, but then I get reminded that this is the same show that has the most immature, juvenile style of humor I have ever seen in any cartoon ever. And they expect me to take all of this stuff seriously? They expect me to take any of it seriously? Hell no, bro. Hell no. If you want me to care this much about the Blitzo-Stolas relationship, then either have good comedy in your cartoon, or have no comedy in your cartoon. After sitting through Helluva Boss Season 2, I think I feel comfortable saying this, and I know people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but sometimes the truth is controversial. Vivian Medrano is bad at making cartoons. Vivian Medrano cannot create good cartoons. She doesn't know what it takes to create a good cartoon. She has good ideas. There are good ideas in both of these shows, but they are executed very poorly or they're completely underutilized. She wants me to take Helluva Boss seriously. She wants me to look at the Blitzo-Stolas relationship and take it seriously, but then she also wants me to laugh at the very immature, crude style of humor that the show has. And it's like, which one do you want? Because I'm not doing both. It is impossible for me to do both. I'm sorry. With the exception of people like John Crickfalusi or the Mighty Magiswords guy, or, people that have done like awful, horrible things, people who have done inexcusable things, with the exception of them, I cannot think of anyone less deserving of a career in animation than Vivian Medrano, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Vivian Medrano's story comes so close to being inspiring and influential. You have this up-and-coming amateur cartoon creator, someone with a concept, someone with an idea that they want to see brought to life. They have a passion project that they want to see become a reality. And so, they work hard and hard and hard creating more of this passion project, coming up with different ideas for it, getting other people to help out with it, to make it more and more of a reality. And then eventually, you're able to create a pilot episode for this passion project. You release it online, and everyone loves it. It becomes a massive overnight viral sensation. Everyone loves it. Everyone wants to see it become a full-fledged cartoon. And then as time goes by, slowly but surely, your cartoon comes closer and closer to becoming a reality, until eventually it does become a reality. Finally, after all of these years, all of that hard work, it paid off, because now your passion project has officially become a reality. And what do you know? Everyone loves it. The internet loves it. There are tons of fans of it. There are tons of people that want to support your passion project. It becomes massively successful, and before you know it, it gets renewed for several more seasons. This creator has officially made it into the animation industry. This creator has made it big into the animation industry. This comes so close to being an amazing, inspiring story. This comes so close to being a very influential story. The only problem is that it happened to the wrong person. It happened to someone who has good ideas for cartoons, but she doesn't know how to fully utilize these ideas. It happened to someone who has the most immature, juvenile style of humor I have ever seen in my life. It happened to someone who, quite frankly, doesn't deserve to have a career in the animation industry. I'm sorry, but she doesn't. There are other people that I would say are undeserving of a career in the animation industry, but that's mostly because of who they are as people. Again, people like John Crickfalusi, the Mighty Magiswords guy, it's like, the reasons why Vivian Medrano doesn't deserve a career in the animation industry are very different from the reasons why they don't deserve a career in the animation industry. I have to make that very clear. Vivian Medrano, as far as I'm aware, is not a terrible person, but I don't care who she is as a person. I don't care if she's a good person or a terrible person. Her cartoons are garbage either way. She doesn't know how to make good cartoons either way. I'm sure she's a great person, but she's also not good at making cartoons. You can be a good person, and you can also be untalented at the same time. There are tons of people that fall under the opposite category. You have people like Kanye West or J.K. Rowling, who are awful people, but they are also undeniably talented. So if it's possible to have awful people that just so happen to be also talented, why is it not possible to have good people who are also untalented? And obviously, yes, there are good people that are also talented, and there are awful people that are untalented. This is all very simple, very easy stuff to conceive. Literally, I have no idea how any of y'all could misinterpret any of this. I don't hate Vivian Medrano as a person. I hate the fact that Vivian Medrano is successful. I hate the fact that her fans enable her to continue making her shows this way, even though there are tons of problems with them in their current state. I hate the wasted potential that lie within both of these shows. I hate the incredibly unfunny, immature style of humor that both of these shows have. I hate the fact that her cartoons get praised for doing the exact same things shows like Velma and Big Mouth get criticized for. I hate the fact that she pointlessly shoehorns in serious dramatic moments into her cartoons that are near damn impossible to take seriously because of how immature and juvenile the humor for both of these shows are. I hate how bloated and cluttered both of these shows are. I hate the fact that both of these shows have like 20 billion main characters in them. I hate the fact that most of these characters feel exactly the same. I hate the fact that a lot of these characters suffer from same-face syndrome. I hate the fact that a lot of these characters either have a very limited color palette or way too many colors in their palette. I hate how unnecessarily cluttered her character designs are. I hate the fact that the animators that work on both of these shows have to go through literal hell, pun 100% intended, just to animate these characters because of how cluttered their designs are. I hate the fact that there is genuine talent involved with both of these shows that are just completely wasted. I hate the fact that both of these shows are the poster children for indie animation, even though honestly they make indie animation look bad. I hate the fact that people act like these are somehow better than corporate Disney, Netflix, Warner Bros. Slop just because they're indie. I hate the fact that I know if Has-Been Hotel was a corporate Netflix Fox cartoon, more people would hate it, but instead they give it a pass because it's indie. I hate the double standards that come from that. I hate the fact that both of these shows in their current state are no better than their 2019 pilots. It would be one thing to have the 2019 pilots for both of these shows be bad, but the fact that the final cartoons for both shows are also bad, if not worse than the 2019 pilots, I think just makes this even more insulting than it already is. I hate the fact that both of these shows unintentionally make LGBT people look bad, emphasis on unintentionally. I hate the fact that Vivian Medrano somehow thought it was a good idea to include tons and tons of LGBT representation into two cartoons that take place in hell. I hate the fact that the LGBT representation in both of these shows feels like they're only used to make cheap sex jokes, as if we already don't have enough of those in these shows. I hate the fact that Charlie and Maggie are the only natural feeling LGBT representation in either one of these shows. The only one where it feels like, oh, they're not just doing it for cheap jokes. It doesn't feel like a or anything like that. It feels like a normal romantic relationship between the two. It feels normal and healthy. It's not used to make cheap sex jokes. It's not treated like a it's treated like a normal thing. I hate the fact that Has-Been Hotel is getting a season 2 that will very likely not be an improvement from season 1. I hate the fact that people are just gonna blindly eat up season 2, even if it ends up being the exact same garbage as season 1, or God forbid, it somehow ends up being worse than season 1. I hate the fact that the inevitable massive success of season 2 is going to lead into Has-Been Hotel getting even more seasons. We already have seasons 3 and 4 on the way. I wouldn't be surprised surprised if they add seasons 5 and 6 in as well. I hate the fact that Helluva Boss has an amazing premise that is completely wasted. I hate the fact that there are very few episodes of Helluva Boss that actually focus on the original premise that the show is supposed to have. I hate the fact that when season 3 of Helluva Boss ever comes out, it's just gonna further abandon this storyline and focus more and more on the boring relationship between Blitzo and Stolas. I hate the fact that they decided not to portray Stolas as a villain. They decided not to portray this romance thing as a bad thing, which would make the story even more interesting. I hate the fact that when season 3 comes along, more and more people are just gonna blindly eat it up just like that. I hate the fact that there will very likely be people inspired by both of these shows. I hate the idea of anyone wanting to create their own cartoon because of has-been hotel of all things. I hate the idea that in the future we're gonna get more adult cartoons that try and rip off Has-Been Hotel's style. In the same way we have tons of failed adult cartoons that try to rip off Family Guy's style. I hate the fact that no matter how constructive your criticism may be, no matter how detailed or lengthy it may be, it'll all be for nothing because Vivian Medrano is successful and you're not. Everything you say to her doesn't matter to her at all. I hate the fact that she doesn't care about any of the criticism that you give her towards her shows, no matter how valid or detailed they may be. I hate the fact that her rabid fanbase will just blindly defend her if you say anything even remotely negative about either of her shows. I hate the very real possibility that people like Ben Shapiro or Elon Musk or whatever, any like anti-woke grifter, could find either of these shows and they'll be like, oh, they're woke DEI propaganda. This is proof that LGBT people are satanic. I hate the fact that if that ever happened, it'll make criticizing both of these shows even harder than it should be. I hate the fact that it'll also make the lives of LGBT people much worse than it already is. I hate the fact that all of this would be happening while Donald Trump is president again. I hate the fact that all of this is happening while America is experiencing a rise in fascism. I hate the fact that all of this is happening while homophobia and transphobia are becoming much more rampant than they already are. I hate the very real possibility that both of these shows will join the club of objectively bad media that's hard to criticize because of anti-woke weirdos. I hate the fact that people will feel the need to blindly defend these two cartoons just because of the anti-woke people. I hate the fact that they will not be able to realize that you can hate both Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss and also hate the anti-woke people that'll hate these shows for homophobic reasons. I hate the fact that no matter what Vivian Medrano does with her cartoons, people will always blindly defend her cartoons just because they're indie. That makes them good. In the same way, you have people blindly defending Disney whenever they do something bad just because they made a couple good movies back in the 90s. I'm sure when that Jimmy Kimmel thing was going on a while back, there were definitely Disney adults that were like, oh, it's okay because they made The Lion King, they made The Little Mermaid, that means it's fine, guys, it's fine. Completely missing the severity of this situation when it came to why people hated Disney during this time. And yes, I just compared Vivian Medrano, an indie cartoon creator, to Disney, a multi-billion-dollar corporation. That should tell you a lot right there. Two sides of the same f***ing coin. I hate the fact that Vivian Medrano has a career in animation. I hate the fact that she will never improve no matter what. I hate the wasted potential that are in both of her cartoons. I hate the fact that people love both of these shows. I hate the idea that either of these shows could end up being influential for someone. I hate Has-Been Hotel, and I hate Helluva Boss. So yeah, to wrap things up, I don't think Vivian Medrano's cartoons are all that good. I think they have a lot of room for improvement, honestly. Alright, being serious again, I have to go over something. Last year, I graduated from high school, and I started taking a film school. I started attending a film college, a film school, whatever. It was located inside of a college, I don't know. I went to college to study film, and I remember being excited for it. I thought this could be like a great next chapter for my life. I thought it was something to look forward to. I started in August of 2024, and I was looking forward to it. I was genuinely excited for it, man. And I loved all of the classes that I took. I loved all of them. I loved learning about, like, you know, film history. I loved learning about, you know, filmmaking, that sort of thing. Learning how to make a movie. Looking at, like, different scenes from movies to get, like, inspiration. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I dropped out of that school very recently. I moved on from it. Eventually, it got to a point where I realized it was all for nothing. None of this was worth it. I was wasting my time with this whole thing. I dropped out at the end of September. Now I want to clarify something very important. I had a good time there. There were good memories that were had at that school. I have nothing against any of the teachers that I had in any of my classes. I have nothing against any of the students that attended these classes alongside me. I have nothing against them at all. None of this is their fault at all. None of them contributed to me deciding to drop out from this whole thing. The problem lies entirely within me and how much of a fucking idiot I was for thinking this was a good idea, for thinking that, like, this was something that I could do, something that I could be able to do. I dropped out of film school because I lost the passion and the motivation to continue forward with this whole thing. I gave up. I quit. It wasn't worth it anymore. It was all for nothing. And there are several different things that caused me to lose that passion and motivation. The rise of AI, the way that my mental health has been this year when compared to last year as a result of the way the world has been this year, and Vivian Medrano. I have zero shame in admitting that Vivian Medrano is part of the reason why I gave up on this dream, that I could somehow make it big in the animation industry or the film industry or any industry for that matter. I gave up completely. I decided it wasn't worth it. I gave up on my dream because of Has-Been Hotel, because of Helluva Boss, and because of Vivian Medrano. Now, Vivian Medrano is not the only reason why I lost the motivation to keep going on with this. She's not even the main reason for that matter. The AI and the mental health, I think, are much bigger reasons as to why I decided to quit this whole thing. But I am not going to deny that she played a part in me deciding, what's the point? Why even bother pursuing a career in animation if someone like this is somehow able to make it big despite creating absolute garbage cartoons? Why do I even waste my fucking time with this, honestly? Thinking about it more, if it weren't for the AI and the mental health stuff, I would still be going to this school, I would still be taking these classes, and I would be looking at both of these shows as motivation. I would be looking at both of these shows as an inspiration. I would be carefully studying both of these shows in order to understand what not to do when creating a cartoon. All of the problems that I have with these two shows, I would study them, and I would make sure not to do anything like that in any cartoon that I could come up with, or any TV show, movie, whatever. Let's say I'm working on a cartoon, and I'm trying to think of jokes to include in the cartoon. I'm trying to think of, like, humor that I could include. I would look at Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss, and how a lot of the humor is just the F word, the B word, sex jokes, and that's it. And I would think, okay, I'm not going to do that. Whatever I do with the humor, I am not going to do that. The swearing and sex jokes will only be used sporadically. It'll only be occasionally. You want to preserve the freshness of the swear words in order to keep them funny. Don't just spam them all at once, because then that'll make them lose their funniness. The shock value of the swear word would be gone if you spammed it a million times. I hate both of these shows so much that genuinely, more than any other cartoon that I've covered on the search for the worst cartoon, with a select few exceptions like Biatches and Fairview, of course, with a select few exceptions, I would look at these two shows as being the perfect examples of how not to make a cartoon, how to fail miserably at making a cartoon, how to deliberately create the worst cartoon ever made that people love for some reason. Everything that could have gone wrong with these shows went wrong. I have ideas for several different cartoons, none of which are ever gonna see the light of day, unfortunately, and sometimes I'm thinking about ideas for these shows, and I would look at Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss as motivation. Whatever Has Been Hotel does, I don't do it for my cartoon. As a matter of fact, one of the cartoons that I had planned, one of the cartoons that I've had an idea for, is indeed a cartoon that's about hell, a cartoon that focuses on demons and sinners and whatever, that sort of thing. Obviously, it'll be very different from Has Been Hotel and Helluva Boss. These are not the first cartoons to take place in hell, and they are not going to be the last either. But I would look at the portrayal of hell in both of these shows, and I would think, okay, whatever these shows do, I don't do it. I do the complete polar opposite, because I know what's right for my cartoon. I know what I want it to be, and I will make sure to avoid all of the mistakes that are made in both of these shows. And also, if this hell demon cartoon were to ever see the light of day, I would make sure to include no LGBT representation into that cartoon, because I don't want to contribute to this hateful, bigoted stigma that LGBT people have to face on a daily basis. I don't want to become part of the problem, regardless of the intentions behind including the LGBT representation, and regardless of how the LGBT representation itself is executed. I just simply don't feel comfortable including LGBT representation into a cartoon that takes place in hell. Unlike Vivian Medrano, I can very easily see why that would be a bad idea. Now I have other ideas for cartoons that are much more normal. They don't have anything to do with hell or demons or anything like that. And so these other cartoons, yeah, for sure, I could include LGBT representation in them, no problem. But this one hell demon cartoon, no, there's going to be no LGBT representation in that cartoon. But alas, I gave up on this dream. I gave up on this whole thing for a lot of different reasons, one of which being Vivian Medrano. The day that I officially quit my school and I moved on from it, I was waiting outside in the front, waiting for my mom to pick me up, and there was only one person that was on my mind, and that was Vivian Medrano. I couldn't stop thinking about how she was somehow able to make it big, despite how awful both of her shows are. And by some insane coincidence, the day that I officially quit my film school was also the day that I uploaded the Homestuck pilot search for the worst cartoon, which, as we all know, was produced by Vivian Medrano. So I already had Vivian Medrano on my mind that day. Little did I know I would end up having even more of her in my mind that day than I expected. I know there's gonna be people that are like, don't give up on this whole thing, focus on people who are genuinely talented and were able to make it big. Instead of focusing on Vivian Medrano making it big, I could focus on someone like Hayao Miyazaki making it big. I could focus on Steven Hillenburg making it big. I could go into these classes with the knowledge that one day I could potentially have the next SpongeBob on my hands. I could potentially have something that will be just as beloved and cherished as SpongeBob. And admittedly, that was the way I looked at things in the latter half of 2024 when I started taking these classes for the first time. I went into them thinking, wow, at some point, I could probably be one of the greats. I could be up there with Quentin Tarantino, with Martin Scorsese, with Christopher Nolan, that sort of thing. And then we left 2024 and entered 2025. And when you look at the way that things have been in 2025, I think it's pretty understandable why I lost a lot of that passion and motivation, why that optimism went away, why I ultimately decided that none of this was worth it, and why I became a glass half empty kind of person, extensively focusing on the fact that Vivian Medrano was somehow able to have a career in animation. I know people are gonna be like, bro, they're just cartoons, you're overreacting, alright? Has-Been Hotel is just a cartoon, relax. I know it's just a cartoon, but it's also a massively successful cartoon, one that quite frankly doesn't deserve to have the success that it has. I have sat through so many terrible adult cartoons, and I will continue to sit through so many adult cartoons, and I honest to God fail to see how Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss are any better or different than a lot of the crap that I've looked at on this series. I fail to see how either of these shows are better than Alan Gregory or The Prince or Hoops or Mr. Burcham, ignoring the fact that it's right wing, that sort of thing. I fail to see how it's better than any of those shows. When I initially reviewed Helluva Boss, I thought it was significantly better than Has-Been Hotel, and I thought it was one of the better cartoons covered on this series. And, well, as you could very clearly see by the length of this video, that has changed drastically. I have now moved Helluva Boss down significantly lower, and honestly, I think I hate this even more than Has-Been Hotel, because I think that this show had a more interesting premise than Has-Been Hotel, and it completely abandons that premise after the first few episodes. It shouldn't be that hard to create an action comedy about demon hitmen, and yet for some reason Vivian Medrano decided, no, let's make it a boring romantic drama instead. Whereas at least Has-Been Hotel sticks to the whole hotel redeeming sinners thing, Like, I really doubt season 2 is going to abandon that storyline. Nevertheless, this is the final Vivian Medrano review that I'll ever make. I am never reviewing anything VivziePop related ever again. When Helluva Boss season 3 comes out, I'm not going to review it. Do not ask me to review it. I'm not going to review Has-Been Hotel Season 2. I don't care how many people ask me. You could pay me $3 billion and I would not review it. I'm sorry. I'm not watching the Homestuck cartoon either whenever that comes out. Like when Season 1 comes out for the Homestuck cartoon, I'm not watching it. I'm not reviewing it. I just think it'll be a colossal waste of time, and I see no reason to bother with any of it. I'm sorry. This is by far the longest, most scathing search for the worst cartoon I've ever made, and I honestly hope it stays that way. I cannot imagine reviewing something that'll make me this angry to this extent. I probably wouldn't be all that angry watching this if it weren't for the fact that I practically gave up on my dreams shortly before I made this video. So I looked at this as just kind of blowing off steam. I already know this is gonna be a massively controversial video, but I don't care. I've said everything that I ever wanted to say about Has-Been Hotel and Helluva Boss. I am sure that Vivian Medrano is a good person. I have nothing against her as a person. I just hate the fact that she has a career that she doesn't really deserve, to be honest. I hate the fact that she will never improve her cartoons. She will never have her cartoons live up to the full potential that they have. And instead, all future seasons for these two shows are just going to be the exact same garbage that we have been getting. Nobody is going to tell her to improve her cartoons, to make them better. People are going to continue consuming this slop. And I've decided enough is enough. I see no reason to waste time watching more of this slop. Godspeed, Vivian Medrano. Godspeed. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.